Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here, wanting to talk to you about Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team and Mororch. But even more specifically than just Mororch, we're going to be talking about the Phobos Strike Team. Now, let's just get straight into it. Let's be clear. This is a first impressions of the Strike Team, and it's a little bit of a read-through for you. I'm not going to be talking about super in-depth strategies. I have played against the Phobos Strike Team twice, and I've played as them once. So this really is first impressions, and that's all I can give you right here, right now. Let's dive straight into it as I read, essentially, the words on the page. That's right, it's a classic man's read books. Man's reads books. Let's do it. Hello everybody, Glass from like 4 days after I originally recorded this, with a nice tasty t-shirt that you can buy. Look at that, it's right beneath this video. But I wanted to quickly add something to this video that I just completely forgot. Basically, I went through this video and I literally just read the book, but I wanted to come back very quickly and let you know my actual thoughts on this team. If you don't have time, if you don't actually care, if you're not going to absorb the words, you just want to know Phobos Kill Team any good, I decided to put my first impressions right here for you. First things first, I've done an overall thoughts on the Mororch box in general, not specifically a man reads book of the Phobos Strike Team, and I'm going to say a very similar thing there. I haven't recorded that yet, but I wanted to just give a super quick pros and cons of the Phobos Strike Team. I think that they're going to be a perfectly fine team. If you like them, I think you can play them without really worrying. Like, you're not going to be absolute bottom of the pack. You're not going to be hunter clade. Kill Team is such a skill-based game that it doesn't, it's so much in the hands of the player. However, with that said, I don't think that in their current iteration, they're not a team that's going to podium unless you get super lucky or you have a very weak field in general. They're just lacking a few key things that I think means they're not a particularly top tier competitive team, but they're totally solid at the same time. You don't have to worry. They have a lot of interesting interactions, and I think they'd be quite fun to play. But I do think that if they wanted to be top tier, they would need a few tweaks. So just keep that in mind. Solid team, middle of the pack. I'd probably say middle to lower of the pack. If you just want to play a real spec Space Marine team, these are totally fine for you. Okay, on with the video. But of course, releasing at exactly the same time as this Phobos Strike Team, there is also the Blooded Militarum Traitoris review, and there is an overview of Mororch as a whole. So depending on what you want to watch, you can watch them all right here, right now. But before we get into it, I would like to quickly say to my subscribers, a big double hello. Wow, wasn't that wholesome? That's right, if you want yourself a nice wholesome hello in the next video, like, subscribe, leave a comment right now. Let's talk about the Phobos Strike Team. I am only going to be discussing the rules here. I'm not going to be complaining as much as I should be about the models. This is just the rules. Okay. Shock and Awe. You can reveal this Tac Op in the Reveal Tac Op step of any turning point. At the end of any turning point, if friendly operatives control one or more objective markers that were controlled by enemy operatives at the start of the turning point, you score 1 VP. If you achieve the first condition, do it again. Saboteurs. I will read this, and then at the end I'll have a little I think this about that. Saboteurs. Reveal this Tac Op in the target reveal step of the first turning point. Starting with your opponent, alternate placing one of your Saboteur tokens in the kill zone until 3 have been placed. Each time a player places a Saboteur token, it must be touching a terrain feature more than 3 inches from the kill zone edges, more than 6 inches, red, pentagon, whatever, from your drop zone, and each of your other Saboteur tokens, and it must not be on a vantage point. If 2 or more of your Saboteur tokens are removed, you score 1 VP. If 3 or more, because there's only 3, if your Saboteur tokens are removed, you score 1 VP. Friendly operatives can perform the Saboteur's mission action. Guerrilla Tactics. You can reveal this Tac Op in the Revealed Tac Op step of any turning point. At the end of any turning point, if more enemy operatives were incapacitated than friendly operatives during that turning point, and more than half of your operatives have a conceal order, you score 1 VP. Do it again. So very briefly, Shock and Awe, I think this is the best one, and I think it may well be used on a regular basis. Saboteurs, dislike, downvote, cancel it, no. Saboteurs, we'll read in a moment exactly what Saboteurs is. I just don't like this one. It's move somewhere, do a thing, but your opponent gets to play something. It's not my vibe. I don't really like giving your ability to score into your opponent's hands. Guerrilla Tactics, I think this one could have some play. It's not as good as Shock and Awe, but it's an option. You'll notice here that it says you have to be on a conceal order. We will soon find out that every model in this team can change to a conceal order for an APL. So therefore it is, you can shoot and flip your order. So it is easily doable, but I think that shock and awe, which is just, push onto the point and score the point after your opponent's already taken it, I think that probably has more play in general. Let's go over to the Phobos Strike Team. I think, as we knew, it's a 6 operative team. That seems to be where Marines are at. We have one Sergeant model, which can be an Infiltrator, an Incursor, or a Reaver. And we get 5 Phobos Strike Teams out of a Commsman, a Helix Adept, a Saboteur, a Veteran, a Vox Breaker, a Normal Dude, Infiltrator, a Mine Layer, a Normal Dude, Incursor, or a Normal Dude, Reaver. So we do notice there, firstly, as we're about to find out, there are no Specialist Reavers. You can take a Normal Dude, you can take a Normal Sergeant, but they don't have any, Comms, Reaver, etc. We're going to go through all of these. Do note, I'm sure you know, but the Reaver models do not come in Kill Team Moroch. You have to buy them as a separate thing. Kill Team Moroch only comes with Infiltrators and Incursors. Let's go over to... Oh, sorry, and up at the top, archetypes are Infiltration, Recon, Seek and Destroy. A lot of people highly rate Security, and they don't really rate the others as high as Security. I think this is going to be just fine. This isn't going to be their downfall, let's just say. Guerrilla Warfare, 1 AP. Change this operative's order. This operative cannot perform this action during the first turning point, or while within red 6 inches of an enemy operative. This is kind of your key. This is what allows you to stay alive in the game. So pretty cool. Obviously, it will essentially, if you're playing a cagey game, turn you into only a 2 APL team if you're wanting to always flip back, but there you go. Omni Scrambler. Once in each strategy phase, when it is your turn to use a strategic ploy or pass, if any friendly operatives with this ability are in the kill zone, you can use this ability instead. So instead of playing a strat ploy, when you would play a strat ploy, you decide Omni Scrambler. If you do so, select one enemy operative visible to any friendly operative with this ability. Does require visibility, not line of sight, but visibility. In the following firefight phase, that enemy operative is treated as having a group activation characteristic of 1, and cannot be activated or perform actions until one of the following is true. A number of enemy operatives have been activated equal to the number of friendly operatives with this ability in the kill zone at the start of the phase. Or it is the last enemy operative to be activated. So let's say you've taken 3 Infiltrators, because it's the Infiltrators that have the Omni Scrambler. You use your Omni Scrambler on one of their models. They have to activate 3 models before they can activate the one that you have Omni Scrambled. I think this is mainly going to be used when when the enemy pushes up with a grenade and they're banking on going first. Or they have something like Only in Death Does Duty End, which is of course something you could do with Compendium Space Marines, or can still be done with Veteran Guardsmen, a normal trooper that has a grenade. You can Omni Scramble it so that it can't immediately throw something, even if you kill it, and they will then just Only in Death Does Duty End it. It's not Only in Death Does Duty End, but yeah. You can Omni Scramble it so that you will at least have X number of turns or activations to move your guys out of threat range. Multi-Spectrum Array. Oh, that's the Infiltrators, get that. Multi-Spectrum Array is for the Incursors. When determining if an intended target is in this operative's line of sight, for the intended target to be obscured, it must be more than 2 circles, which is 4 inches, instead of only 1 circle, which is 2 inches, from a point at which a cover line crosses a terrain feature that is obscuring. You also ignore areas of smoke, but they have no effect. I really like this. I think this is a good one. Trying to get things like, you can quite easily get your models 2 inches away from a piece of heavy terrain and just be quite comfortably obscured. But 4 inches, obviously it depends on your terrain, that's quite a large, that's a big difference. That's all I'm saying. So I quite like this. Saboteurs. Gosh, I don't know. It's an action that costs 1 AP. An operative can perform this action while within 1 inch of one of your Saboteur tokens, which is something we just talked about over here. Unless the operative is a Saboteur or Mine Layer, those are 2 keywords we're about to find in the datasheets. An operative cannot perform this action while within engagement range of an enemy operative. If this action is performed, remove that Saboteur token. So this is just something that allows you to score one of your Tac Ops. It doesn't do anything else, so we can ignore that. Guerrilla Warfare, everybody gets it. Omni Scrambler, Infiltrators get it. Multi-Spectrum Array, Incursors get it. Terror, Reavers get it. Now, keeping in mind that over here, we know there are no Reaver specialists. There's just the Standard Warrior and the Sergeant. Terror, all their equipment has to save the Reaver. Okay. Terror, 1 AP. Until the end of the turning point. Each time an enemy operative would perform a mission action or the pickup action. If any friendly operatives that perform this action during this turning point are within 3 inches of that enemy operative, 1 additional action point must be subtracted for that enemy operative to perform that action. So, for example, if you're moving on to a point and it's a mission where you need to activate to, give the point to your team, instead of being 1 AP, it will now be 2 AP. When determining control of an objective marker that any friendly operatives that perform this action during this turning point are within range of, treat enemy operatives' total APL as being 1 less. Note this is not a modifier. And that's pretty standard. So any sort of mission action costs an extra AP. You also count as being 1 less AP for determining controlling. And that's it. We'll talk about what sort of team you might want to take towards the end of the video. So let's keep going, because we got a lot to talk about. We go on to the ploys, the strats, the tacts. Bolter discipline, shoot twice. Shock assault, fight twice. I'm glad those were easy. Vanguard. It can ignore the first distance. Oh, this is the entire team. It's not like Reavers only or something. This is everyone. It can ignore the first distance of 2 inches it travels for a climb, drop, or traverse. It automatically passes jump tests. Add 1 inch to its movement characteristic. So this is pretty good. So if you're playing on Octarius terrain, which are 3-inch high buildings, therefore it is only 1 circle to drop, because of how drop rounds down instead of up, like climbing. So you can drop for free off 3-inch high terrain. +1 to your movement actually makes you pretty fast, and nobody has ever in the history of this game made a jump test. So I guess that's there. And they shall know no fear. Ignore any or all modifiers of APL. Friendly Phobos Strike Team operatives are not injured. Let's look at the data sheets, shall we? Infiltrator Commsman. So, first thing to note, all the infiltrators have the same stat lines. It's exactly what you'd expect. 3 circle, 3 APL, GA1, defense 3, save 3 up, 12 wounds. Okay? This is the same stat line as the compendium. Nice. The Marksman Bolt Carbine is the same Marksman Bolt Carbine as infiltrators get in the compendium. That's the same for the infiltrators, that's the same for the incursors. The Reavers are essentially +1 damage. We'll talk about that when we get to a Reaver, but I'm not going to go over their basic guns. They're bolters, which means they're 3-4. The infiltrators are lethal 5 up. The incursors are, if you take more than 1, would be a no cover. Okay, so and Omni Scrambler as an ability, Guerrilla Warfare as a unique action. This guy gets Comms Array. Select 1 other friendly Phobos Strike Team operative visible to this operative. So only note that not him, can't do it to himself. That operative can immediately perform a free 1 AP action. It cannot perform an action it has already performed during this turning point, or an action in which it moves, and it cannot perform that action again during this turning point. This operative cannot perform this action while within engagement range of an enemy operative. So you can't move a model, so there's no sudden last second dash, but you can shoot, you can use your guerrilla warfare, you can do a mission action. This is actually, I would argue, pretty versatile. I'm not saying it's better than a standard +1 APL. So yeah, I generally quite like this. Do note also, we still have the chapter selectable keyword there. Still no use for these, just going to throw that out there for you now. Infiltrator Helix Adept. This is essentially the medic. Combat Restorative is the standard. If a guy dies, you res them for 1 APL. Helix Gauntlet is heal them for 2d3 lost wounds. There you go. Don't need to talk about him any further. We then go to the Saboteur. Right. He gets Marksman Bolt Carbine. Yep, we know that. But it also gets remote explosives. 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, 5, 6, AP1, detonate, silent. So obviously this is super big. This is pretty standard. Obviously we know exactly what this does because we've already dealt with the veteran guardsman and how that works. It's essentially the same thing, except in this one you don't get a free APL. Sorry, you don't get a free dash after you've done it. So with this one, you run up, so that's 1 for your move. You then plant this, which is going to be a 2nd APL, and then you need to dash away, probably, which is a 3rd APL. If you then want to, in the same turn, shoot, you'd really have to have your commsman come up and force that extra APL onto you. It just means you're going to have to work in a little bit of a unified way if you want to get this bomb to go off immediately. We then get the Infiltrator Veteran. So again, Infiltrator, except we don't get the lethal 5-up. This time we get Custom, which is this right here. Custom. If this operative is selected for deployment, select up to 2 of the following special rules or critical hit rules for this weapon to gain for the battle. Balanced, lethal 5-up, no cover, mortal wound 1, P1, rending. So this is nice for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's during the battle. You don't say this on the roster. You can see who you're going into, you know, which faction, and then pick what you want. I would recommend the default pick here is lethal 5-up, P1. Nice. Unless you're against something that has an invuln save, for example, Void Dancers, in which case you probably want to look at either balanced or lethal 5-up rending. We then look at the Infiltrator Voxbreaker. I know what you're thinking. There's a lot of Infiltrators here. You are correct, there are. Voxbreak, 1 AP. While an enemy operative is within 6 inches of this operative, each time that enemy operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack in the roll attack dice step of that combat or shooting attack, your opponent cannot reroll their attack dice. Turns off rerolls within 6 inches. Good. So this will be really good against some teams, almost pointless against others. Auspex Scan. Costs you 1 AP. Select 1 enemy operative with a conceal order within 6 inches of this operative. Then select 1 friendly Phobos Strike Team operative visible to and within 3 inches of this operative. Till the end of the turning point, that friendly operative treats that enemy operative as if it has an engage order. This operative cannot perform this action while within the engage range of an enemy operative. So this is really nice, and for a moment I thought, oh my god, Hunter Clade has been so screwed by their Omnispecs, because this is so good. But do note, you have to be within 6 inches of the enemy operative. That's the big thing. If this was full board or specs, this would be really, really good. As it is, this guy, even though he's just a ranged dude, he needs to be pretty close to the enemy to really be doing his thing. And he kind of needs to be working with other people in the team. He can't just go and do his own thing. Do note he can select himself with this, so he does give this to himself. Unless they're going to FAQ it, say other. You probably want to have a better gun than a standard marksman bolt carbine going into the enemy. We then get the Infiltrator Warrior. You're never going to take that. We get the Infiltrator Sergeant. So this is the Sergeant model. Again, standard Sergeant stat line, which means exactly the same as all of the other stat lines we've seen, but +1 wound. All the same, cool. Strategize, 1 AP. You gain 1 CP, this operative cannot perform this action while within 6 inches of an enemy operative. So this means that you can just say, hey, my sergeant activates, I get a CP. I imagine this is kind of mandatory. And this is important, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the other sergeant models. But for now, just keep this in mind. It's pretty good. Can't do it within 6 inches of an enemy. Okay. We then get on to the Incursor Marksman, arguably the best. The unquestionable auto-take of the team. Yeah. I can't imagine you ever not taking him, no matter how themed for another. If you want to take all Infiltrators or all Reavers, you're always taking the Incursor Marksman. So firstly, notice we go from Omni Scrambler to Multi-Spectrum Array. That's right, we've moved on to the next set of special rules, abilities that we have there. And the Multi-Spectrum Array is the thing that makes when they shoot, you're not obscured until you're at 4 inches instead of 2, which is perfect for the marksman. You then get a, oh sorry, so he also has a really cool bolt gun, Stalker Marksman Bolt Carbine, 4 attacks hitting on 2s, standard bolter, 3-4, but it's got AP1 and lethal 5 up. So, you know, he's pretty good at killing stuff, can't argue with that. We then have a long old rule here, track target, it's 1 AP. It basically gives you the Overwatch that we all wanted to exist in the game, because it's just like XCOM's Overwatch. Now I'll read the actual wording, but understand, that's all this is. Once this turning point during enemy operative's activation, after that enemy operative performs an action, you can interrupt that activation. If you do so, this operative can perform an Overwatch action. If it has a conceal order, change it to an engage order to do so. It must make that shooting attack against that enemy operative using its Stalker Marksman Bolt Carbine. Cool. So you can't give this guy a crack grenade and then make him Overwatch with it. Nice, makes sense. If that enemy operative is not incapacitated or revived as a result, finish its activation. This action is treated as a shoot action with a bolt weapon, page 38, for the purposes of action restrictions, although this operative can perform this action if it has a conceal order. Hold up, stop right there. I'm about to say a bunch of stuff that isn't correct, because when I read this out to you, remember, first impressions video, turns out I didn't get this rule. So I've returned to you now, like 3 days later, and marksman, I want to explain to you exactly how track target works, because I didn't get it. The reason it says at the end, this action is treated as a shoot action with a bolt weapon for the purposes of action restrictions, means that it is performing a shoot action. Ignore that the first half, you know, the first bold letter there, word there, is Overwatch. Forget that. Doesn't matter. This is a shoot action. This means that if you want to shoot, you know, with your bolt, with this bolt gun in your activation, you then cannot track target. Okay? That's what that means. Unless, obviously, you use bolter discipline. Then you can shoot and track target. The reason this is an Overwatch is because the rules guys felt that it was too strong to be a regular shoot action, and so they instead wanted you to be at -1 to your ballistic skill when you made the track target shoot. So let's be clear, you cannot shoot twice, as in shoot once in your regular activation and then track target to shoot again later. However, this is a shoot action, not an Overwatch action, so you could, for example, move, dash into position, track target on an important objective, so that you've got full line of sight of the important objective for after your activation ends, your last APL being track target, fire your track target, and then still Overwatch, because you haven't Overwatched, you've shot outside of your activation. Different things. Okay, with that said, back to the video. In cursor mine layer. Haywire mine. So, also, we now have the Oculus Bolt Carbine. Again, 4 attacks, 3s, 3-4. Standard bolter. No cover this time. Cool. He's got a Haywire mine. 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, 2-4, lethal 5 up, no cover, stun. Now, why would we take this, a 2-4, over, where is it, the Saboteur, which is a 5-6, AP1. Okay, 2 up, 2-4, lethal 5 up, no cover, stun. 2 up, 5-6, AP1. Why are we taking this instead of the mine layer, instead of the Saboteur? Well, let me tell you for why. As we discussed earlier with this, very hard to make it go off in a single turn. You have to move, you have to drop it down, and then you probably have to run away, because otherwise you'll probably kill yourself. This is a proximity mine. You don't have to action to make this go off. This means you run up, you drop it, you run away, you don't have to worry about it ever again. You do not need to action to make this go off. Cool, very nice. I like it. Great little bit of tech here to deny an objective. Not so brilliant against certain teams. You know, like this isn't going to kill a Marine, but if you got some Vet Guard, very cool. Although I would note, you're going to find later in the week when I release some of my battle reports, I took a mine layer and I completely messed up the placement of this mine. Despite it being a proximity and you not having to activate it, I would still recommend that you lay it almost as if you want to make sure that as many models, you want to make sure that you run in and make this token, this 3 inches, cover as many models when you lay it, because then it will hit all of those models as soon as any of them move. If you drop it on an objective, only one model is going to run onto that objective and it's going to hit that one model. But if you can catch 2, 3, 4 of them all bunched up, this is amazing. And there's no way they can avoid it. Whereas in theory, with the Saboteur, you drop this, and there are, let's say, 3, 4 models all in its radius. Well, you still have to activate this guy. At least one of them is going to be able to move away before you're able to use your Commsman to make him go pop. So Mine Layer, cool. Incursor Warrior, doesn't matter. You're never going to take him. Incursor Sergeant, so exactly the same as the Infiltrator Sergeant, except you have a different bolt gun. Nice. Reaver Warrior. Okay, so we do need to look at the Reavers, because we have a Reaver Warrior and a Reaver Sergeant. Let's start with the Warrior. I don't think you're ever going to take him. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think you will ever take the Reaver Warrior. Sorry, the Strategize for the Incursor Sergeant is just as useful as the Strategize for the Infiltrator Sergeant. Need to mention that. Which brings us to the Reaver Warrior and briefly the Reaver Sergeant. So the Reaver Warrior is, you're never taking the Bolt Carbine, because if you take the Bolt Carbine you have to take the Fist, not the Combat Knife, very sadly. And the Bolt Carbine is just significantly worse than either the Incursor or the Infiltrator Datasheet bolt gun variants. So you don't take that. So that leaves you with a Special Issue Bolt Pistol, which is a pistol, so range 6, but only AP1, otherwise still a regular bolter, and the Combat Knife. 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, 4/5. Oh, also you have Terror, which, as already discussed, allows you to make it harder for enemies to perform actions, and also makes it harder for them to hold objectives versus you. They are... We will talk about them a little bit more when we get to the equipment, because they still have the same equipment that they could take from Compendium. Allows them to be a little bit more versatile when it comes to moving. I'm going to be honest, we will never see more than a single Reaver. Now, the Reaver Sergeant is the same as the Reaver Warrior, except it's hitting on 2s, and it has the Strategize. Now, don't forget that Strategize cannot be performed whilst within 6 inches of an enemy, and you can't do anything else outside of 6 inches. Therefore, despite initially, I'd seen all of the other data sheets, and I thought, oh, well, I'd love to take a Reaver, I just don't know which one. Don't know what to do. I know, I'll take a Sergeant, because the Incursor Sergeant and the Infiltrator Sergeant, well, they're just kind of basic guys, they don't do anything else. But actually, if you take the Reaver Sergeant, not only do you need to spend all of your APL on getting closer to the enemy, you also really probably should stay outside of 6 inches of them. But if you're doing that with the Reaver, you're also not doing anything else. Whereas at the very least with an Incursor or an Infiltrator Sergeant, you can just kind of have a guy at the back to stand on an objective, get you 1 CP a turn, and, possibly take a shot if it's needed. We're going to talk about the fact that they just have regular bolt guns a little bit later. Yeah, also, I suppose, just throwing it out there, in general, Incursor Sergeant, Infiltrator Sergeant, which should you take? Well, it's a tough one. Lethal 5-up is just significantly better than no cover, but the Incursor does have a Combat Blade, which is 3/5 instead of 3/4, but again, you don't want to ever be using that, because then you won't be within 6 inches. You will be within 6 inches of an enemy. The only possibility I can think of to take a Reaver Sergeant is that there's the potential that actually the way these guys end up really being played, by these guys I don't mean Reavers, I mean the Phobos Strike Team, is that you always move dash and then action and then next turn you charge. And actually that's more effective than these guys, because okay, you're stockpiling CP, but then you just end up using it on rerolls and kind of throwing it away. And if you don't need the rerolls, you know, we will have to see. So that's the datasheets done. We then go to equipment. And I am just going to flick through the Spec Ops very quickly. I won't be reading the whole thing out, but... So, grapple launcher, grab shoot. Not going to discuss those because it's the same from Compendium. And they just allow your... It is Reaver only as well. I'm going to be honest. I think, and I'm just going to throw it out there, that it's possible that what may occur if we end up never seeing Reavers taken in a list, despite Terror being a possible reason to take them, I could see these being added to their datasheets. Right now, if it were up to me, I'd probably add those to the datasheets. You know, yeah. So that's just me. Smoke grenade. The smoke grenade is the same as the Compendium grenade, and I'm like 99% sure it's going to get FAQ'd to work as the new smoke grenades work. They're fine. You know, they're relatively useful. Smoke grenades are good, and I can see a world where perhaps they get taken alongside... Oh, you know what? Give Reavers a free smoke grenade, and then we'd be cooking with gas, and suddenly I'd be looking at those. Instead, if we don't want to give them the grapnels and the grav shoots, give them smoke grenade, free smokes. That could be a reason to take them, for sure. But the smoke grenades do pair quite nicely with these guys, because it allows you to move them onto an objective, and despite their terrible range, drop a smoke on them, and then they're kind of relatively safe. I think that... yeah, I don't... Okay, so let's also talk about the throwing knife, as that is a new piece of equipment. It's 2 EP, it's 6-inch range, only get to use it once, similar to a grenade in that regard, as it is limited. Has the silent, which is nice. 2-5 damage, so you're fishing for crits, really. I don't think this is something you'll really take, to be honest with you. Yep. Because we have crack grenades. Yeah, sorry. You know, I hate having to boil down an equipment read-through to take 3 cracks. But I think this is a take 3 cracks sort of list. Because crack grenades are just so good, guys. Yeah. The only time you might not take 3 cracks is when you might take a smoke. Maybe you want to do 2 cracks and a smoke, or even 1 crack and a smoke. But you're always taking a crack, unless that gets FAQ, because honestly, something needs to happen about crack grenades. Frag grenades, probably not, but crack grenades, yeah. Then just a very quick flick through the Spec Ops, because I know that in the past, a lot of people complained that nobody ever actually looks at the Spec Ops system. But there is technically a narrative in this game. I don't know if you know that. I'm not going to read any of it out. That's going to take far too long. This has already gone on long enough. That's the blooded. All right, let's get back here. Let's give our final... what list are you building? What's the default takes for the Phobos Strike Team? So from my 2 games of playing them, playing against them, and 1 game of playing them, I think... You know, this is assuming... So if you bought the Mororch box, you can build everything. So that's not an issue, and you can take them as you want. But if you're like me and you hate hobby and you just want to get it done as quickly as possible, minimum operatives built. Let's come up with a 6-man team. Judging from what I just said, it looks like it's either going to be an infiltrator sergeant or a reaver sergeant. I do like the multi-spectrum array from the incursor sergeant, but I think that the 5-up from the infiltrator is probably the better option in general, unless it turns out that actually the Reaver Sergeant does have play, in which case he would probably be the Reaver that I end up taking, so he can play around with Terror, etc, etc. But, you know, you're kind of potentially giving up a CP a turn there. So, let's say the Infiltrator Sergeant, that's the one you want to build. Okay. Commsman, I think the comms is mandatory. That ability to perform an extra activation is going to be absolutely critical. I think it's a tough one. So in all of the teams where you have 10 plus models and you have a medic, the medic is great. I'm not sure the medic is the one I'm going to... So I want Commsman. You definitely want the marksman. These are the the two musts in my opinion. After those two, we've got three more. I think the Veteran is a great killer as well. Same as the Marksman, works in a different way, a little bit more basic, but great. And that leaves us with two left. And that leaves us with the Voxbreaker, the Saboteur, the Helix Adept, and the Mine Layer. 2 spots, 4 models. For me personally, I think your best option is actually both the Saboteur and the Mine Layer. Yeah, not because I want to perform Saboteurs, not because I ever want to take that Tac Op. Weirdly, no. I just think that those 2 tools are actually ultimately better than the Voxbreaker and the Medic. Obviously, I could be wrong. The Voxbreaker is cool. It does a lot of good stuff, but I think because of the way it works, it's probably going to be better to have the ability to lay 2 types of mines to work in slightly different ways. But that, everybody, is the Phobos Strike Team. I hope you found this helpful. I am ever so sorry for the terrible Kill Team models that they've given us that go with these potentially really cool rules. I guess a final statement. How do I think they're going to perform in the meta? That's a tough one. You know, you always have to wait to see what happens, but I think they are going to be solidly middle tier. I don't think they're going to be taking out the top tier, but I also do not think that they're bottom tier at all. I think they have some real play. Obviously, they do have some hard matchups that perhaps the other bottom tier aren't going to play into as poorly, but that's just how it goes when you have an elite team. You're going to be a very swingy team when it comes to results, so I think they'll be solidly mid-tier. Anyway, if you made it to the end of the video, guys, I'd like to give you a big triple hello. Wow, the wholesomeness knows no bounds in this Phobos Strike Team video. Don't forget the Blooded are out, and also my general overview of Kill Team Moroch is probably also out. If you're a Patreon subscriber, I have additional videos there discussing specifically the Phobos Strike Team from a different perspective other than just mine. And coming up later in the week, I've got some battle reports between the Phobos. I think they're appearing twice. The Blooded are coming up at least once, if not twice, and yeah. So look out for that during the week. All right, goodbye everybody.